Podcasting since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts radio network. kingofpodcasts.com.
Another corporate media merger? Check. Another corporation never worked in television or cable? Check. Investors or private equity? Check.
The King of Podcasts radio network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast. Here is the King of Podcasts.
The Paramount-Skydance merger is complete. And we're going to go through all of it and what it means for Hollywood and for everyone out there, as, you know, in the same way that radio industry says, well, we need to go and compete against the internet. Well, that's what Paramount and CBS and all these other companies that are being bought by Skydance is looking to go and do. Listen, when you had COVID, when you had all these things where these media companies continue to hemorrhage money, when they're corporately owned and operated, and they run on a debt, and they can't do much more with it because they're not incapable of creating good quality content because they're all suits looking for money, but they don't know how to create the content that creates cash. So what do they do now? Paramount at this point, they have a lot of properties together from other media mergers that have gone on for decades, which have the Paramount logo embedded on top of it. Now we get Skydance to take over. And here's what we got. We haven't never really gone into who Skydance is, but if you know this program for as long as you have, you know that the radio industry operates the same way. Corporate media, you can see some of the troubling signs when there's a corporate media merger like this that happens. Let's go through some of these normal bases that we're going to go through right now. Here's what we got. So essentially, this Paramount Skydance media deal has been approved by the FCC today, as I record. It's an $8.4 billion merger, creating a new entity called the Paramount-Skydance Corporation. Paramount's still going to be in the front of the name. It's a comprehensive acquisition of Paramount Global's assets by Skydance Media, which is backed by billionaire David Ellison and investment firm Redbird Capital. So Skydance is getting the following: TV networks, the CBS Television Network, the Tiffany Network, CBS News and CBS owned and operated stations, CBS Sports, and the CBS Sports Network. They will retain the 12.5% stake into the CW network. Not much left after what was going on with Paramount and Viacom. BET Media Group, which is BET and BT Plus. Nickelodeon, Nick Jr., Nicktoons, Nick at Night, Teen Nick, Showtime, the Movie Channel, Flicks, MTV, and Comedy Central. It'll be Comedy Central. One of the things that was done before the Skydance Media merger, the South Park's folks, Matt Stone, Trey Parker, cashed in $1.5 billion for the next 5 years to produce 50 episodes for Paramount. Good on them. Good on them. And I saw that first episode, or at least saw, highlights of it. Okay, we're going to just rehash jokes. That's what it felt like. I mean, to me, it's like, okay, 20 years later, yeah, you run out of what they're going to do. Like, how creative can you be and how funny can you stay after all this time? Like The Simpsons continues to go on as well. But it's like they were throwing a wad of cash because there's nothing else left of these companies to do anything with. Like South Park has been an institution for a long time. What was it, 1995, right? 94? 30 years plus. And so, like, what else do you do? Their 20th season now in play. I don't know what they do to keep themselves relevant and going. But look, the money's there. So the check's in the mail. Trey and Matt can do whatever they want in Colorado. Make their shows as they want. Make them, current as they like. And deliver a show within a week. And that's how they'll do it. And we'll see. I don't know. I didn't try to go watch it. I'm not going out of my way. Because the thing is now, it's like, I don't know. See them coming back and do another season of shows? Like, God, man. They were doing fine with the movie stuff. Like the little 2-part specials. That was cool. But come back again. And also after a long hiatus. If you're not in there consistently trying to, refresh your jokes, it's going to be tough. But, hey, every show is going to go through their other side of the road, the twilight, okay? Rick and Morty has lost it. After the whole thing with Justin Roiland, I mean, this one I know about Justin Roiland and why people didn't want him around anymore, but you know what? Was the talent on that show, because now look what's happened to it. It's not the same. And him and Dan Harmon, they had a good thing going. Now you try to put that show together, and it's not hitting anymore. So another show lost itself. The rebellion that was into it. Well, Paramount are not really rebellious anymore. They're billionaires. I mean, come on. They're billionaires. They're not the rebel rousers that they were in 1994. They're not. For a good 15, 20 years, they were very relevant and they were funny. But now it's just a payday. It really is. They didn't have to go. Paramount, in this case, Paramount Plus, they were desperate to have something up there that people will go ahead and watch on a regular basis. And okay, so the Tyler Sheridan stuff is not the stuff that's going to hold up all the time. I watch a lot of stuff on Paramount Plus, but you know, they got to find other things they could do. Tyler Sheridan stuff can only go for so long. So they'll figure something out. Film studios, they will get Paramount Pictures. Nickelodeon Movies, Paramount Animation, Paramount Players, Miramax, they have a 49% stake in Miramax, 50% stake in United International Pictures, Paramount Home Entertainment, and Paramount Music. They also have access, they have control of 3 streaming services, Paramount Plus, most prominent, I think it's 50 million subscribers on there, Pluto TV, which is one of the most prominent, open, free, ad-supported services that are out there, which is incredible. By the way, Pluto TV is badass. I like it. I don't watch it enough, but it is really good. And CBS Sports HQ. The other holdings they have are CBS Studios, which is like, because CBS is not really outsourcing to any other studios for their content. I mean, they still do some of the things, but for the most part, like anything that's CSI or FBI or, you know, NCIS, whatever that is, like all those kind of shows, a lot of CBS programming, Tracker, Matlock, Fire Country, they're all picked up by other companies. It's just what they do. CBS Media Ventures, Big Ticket Television, Nickelodeon's Animation Studio, Nickelodeon Productions, Paws Incorporated. They also have cinema chains that are overseas. And again, 28 local TV station licenses of 28 CBS owned and operated stations around the country. Now, Skydance has their own set of media production. They have an animation division, interactive, new media production, sports, and television. So they've been in the game as a provider of content. Now they own networks, air content. Now, as for Skydance Media, they are a privately owned company, as we said. Primary ownership is the Ellison family. The controlling stake of the company, Redbird Capital Partners, private equity, TJ E&M, Tencent, and KKR. They're all minority stakes together. Now, Paramount Global was publicly traded, and the new Paramount-Skydance Corporation will continue to be publicly traded. Skydance Media itself has not been. It's been privately owned. But let's clear up things. Yes, they are a privately owned company. And I wanted to ask, well, does this refer to private equity? Well, no. Private equity refers to investment firms that raise capital for institutional and accredited investors to acquire and manage companies with the ultimate goal of selling for a profit. While Skydance Media is a privately owned company, their investors are private equity. So Skydance primarily has been producing media production and financing. Producing films, TV shows, animation, and video games. They're centered on creating content and building franchises, not solely on buying and selling companies. That's Skydance. But they have strong ties to the private equity world because Redbird Capital Partners is private equity and KKR is private equity. So there's a little bit of a divvying where they are creating content and they're not just buying and selling. Skydance is not a private equity firm in the traditional sense, but it's heavily backed by and partners with private equity, providing with significant capital for its ambitious projects, including the Paramount acquisition. And prior to doing this, the only other media space they actually acquired was an animation unit called Ellison Studios in 2020. a Madrid-based firm, and the firm would recreate into Skydance Animation. Their core business is production, but their strategic investments and the involvement of private equity partners indicate a broader interest in acquiring and consolidating media assets that align with their long-term content and franchise-building strategy. Paramount acquisition is a monumental step in that direction. Now, one of the things we talked about prior to all this is that we had heard that with this Paramount-Skydance merger, that there would be a plan for spinning off all the cable networks. It's already been done with Versant, with NBC Universal. We know that the same thing's going with Warner Bros. Discovery. They're all unloading all their television to cable properties and pushing them off into separate companies, because those are basically on the selling block. All those networks are going to be up for sale. So at the moment, there has been no immediate full spinoff announced. So we don't know anything about that yet. The plan from David Ellison and Jeff Shell, who will lead a new company, they are looking to go ahead and make sure that CBS, which is the broadcast network that is one of the most important assets of this merger, is a cornerstone asset. Paramount Plus and Pluto TV are seen as key for streaming growth and profitability, so they're going to try to do things to try to grow and maximize subscribers or listeners or viewers to that. Film production through Paramount Pictures and animation with Skydance Animation will be central to content creation. They're also very interested in sports content. So Jeff Shell has talked about the analogy of a barbell for revenue for linear TV, the traditional TV outlet, that broadcast and streaming are at the two weighted ends, and the skinny bar represents cable networks. Linear TV is not being abandoned, they're saying, but it's not the primary growth engine for the new company either. They're also looking to explore strategic partnerships and asset sales, so that some of the cable networks or some parts of them could be sold off or restructured in the future if they don't align with the core strategy or if a good offer arises. Well, keep this in mind. We have, channels like MTV, VH1, BET, primarily music channels when they first came out, among other things. And when you look at some of these channels, they're basically just housing just content they've had produced in the past. And maybe some new content out there, but they're not aggressive in creating new content. VH1 throwing Love and Hip Hop on. It was VH1 before, now it's over on MTV. And same thing with Ridiculousness and all these other shows that they have. But they're also just kind of relying on other programming just to kind of fill up the lineup of what they have available 24 hours a day. Paramount had explored selling certain cable assets. They were looking to put up BET originally, but the idea was to go and look at that. So, among the other mergers we've already seen before, when Comcast, Universal, NBC, all that was put together, and Warner Bros. Discovery that we got through a couple of years ago, they were looking to go ahead and optimize or divest parts of their cable portfolios. So, to unload. Cable's a dying breed. But the idea is to see what they can do with these properties. They're going to do a strategic review that will lead to restructuring, consolidating, or potentially selling rather than a predetermined spinoff. And they're going to be optimizing their value and aligning them with the company's new priorities in streaming, film, and key broadcast sports content. They're following the same rules, the same kind of rules that these other big media companies are doing. They're not going to be in the business of saying, okay, we're going to build all this new content for television. It's for streaming, primarily. And also, for films, they're going to be getting movies exclusively on Paramount Plus. They're going to try to put everything out in theaters. Get a good recoup of the funds, and then put it on streaming after the fact. Which is kind of commonplace right now, what most companies are trying to go and do. Now, the industry rags out there have been reporting all about this. I went to all the major rags as what they did to report on this, because there's a bit of a change on how they want to go ahead and talk about it. Because, there's things that they feel that are going to be compromised as a result of this. Political compromise. There's a creative compromise. There's a lot of things behind it. But the thing is, some of this is going to be irrelevant because at the end of the day, this Paramount-Skydance company still has to go up against the internet. And the continuation of certain programming that maybe for, the first 70 years of television? 80 years, excuse me? Might have been important at the time, but not anymore. There's just certain things that just don't matter to what happened with this digital disruption I've talked about since I started this program. It just all changed. The deal's expected to close in the next coming weeks. And without going to what FCC is saying about this and what they're going to do, there is some political swaying that's going on for the FCC as they make this point. Because Skydance, upon the approval of the FCC of this merger, they submitted to 3 areas of commitments to the FCC. Number 1, ensuring that DEI programs, diversity, equity, inclusion, will be shut down, and they have been shut down. Appointing an ombudsman to review complaints of bias or other concerns, involving CBS as part of ensuring viewpoint diversity, and investing in local news and working with affiliated broadcast stations to serve local communities. Brendan Carr will say, the chairman of the FCC, that Americans no longer trust the legacy national news media to report fully, accurately, and fairly. It's time for a change. So he welcomes Skydance's commitment to make significant changes at the one-storied CBS broadcast network. I mean, it doesn't sound good, the fact that we have the FCC or anybody else kind of telling what they need to go and do in terms of, complying with the FCC. I mean, I guess with content, yeah. I mean, it should be understood that content should be regulated when it is for language or sexual, natured content or, whatever. Violence, sex, language. Yes, those kind of areas we absolutely need to make sure they're always going to, maintain a certain regulation to it. But the part that you're talking about here, where there's alleged media bias, and I mean, the thing is, I could care less if these network news channels decided to go and make changes. The thing is, people are not getting their news from these sources. I mean, there's an older demographic that does, but look, let's just make this clear. The bulk of the paying audience of media content, they're watching on social media. They're watching streaming. And, if you want to get their advertising dollars, you're probably better off with a YouTube video than trying to get them to watch anything on TV, or on a TV set for that matter. But people are not into appointment viewing. People are not so much accustomed to watching evening news at 6:30 p.m. wherever you are, or watching late night programming at 11:30 at night. That kind of work, or talk shows in the daytime, game shows in the daytime, soap operas in the daytime. Like, there was a whole way that the content was done, but if it was done good and people enjoyed it and you had a mass appeal, then all this would be still relevant. But one of the things that was a mistake during COVID is that some of these companies, they decided to divest out of the networks and go more into streaming. Look, it's the same thing that goes 20 years ago when you talk about Napster and how it disrupted the space with music streaming. Same thing happens once again here, where, you had these physical properties and the advertising dollars you were getting off of those. And if you didn't do anything to make sure that you kept people to watch the product, didn't put enough into it to get it back, then people don't want to go to that anymore. I mean, the cable companies, the load of commercials, the amount the cable bill is these days, people don't want to spend that kind of money anymore. So let's find a way to get off of there. Let's go ahead and move ourselves off and find a way to say, okay, you know what? Streaming sounds like a good idea. And in 2020, guess what everybody did? They thought, $30-$40, we can watch all this different content. We don't need the cable. We can cut it. We need to watch network TV? No. Because there wasn't that much left. Because they were all centered on individual intellectual properties. Let's just put on a different Chicago show, PD, medical, fire. Let's just do that. Now Fire Country has another show, some police country, something like that, right? They're going to have that come up. Rescue 911. Now they got another show that's coming up. Like, okay, one show does well. Let's just spin it off. Something else. Another property with the same intellectual property attached to it. That's the idea. There's a reason why Dick Wolf has had 9 shows on the air across NBC and CBS. Do that. But it can't really get that much anymore. At this point, constant cuts on various programming. What else are you going to do? And trust me, with Paramount, before they get Skydance ready to go and set up, yeah, they were kind of cleaning up house because, no matter what, Paramount was going to have to make changes. Okay? Certain programs that don't stay around anymore. Okay, Dick Wolf, one of your shows, FBI Most Wanted, canceled. A handful of shows that have been around for a long time got canceled on CBS. Yeah. And then you have what? The Talk on CBS, also canceled. Replaced it with a soap opera. See how that goes. Now Stephen Colbert. And, last week on the program, I talked about it because the news broke late on Thursday night. And I brought it up. And, there's been a lot of talk about that ever since. At the end of the day, man, no media company is going to operate a program that's running on a $46 million a year loss. It can't happen. And you're paying for 200 people of staff and $15 million to the host. Like, all those late night shows are irrelevant. And, I don't think anybody's going to really miss if Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert going away. I mean, there's nobody else trying to create late night shows to go up against them anymore because there's no interest in that now. Not at all. Remember, we used to have different shows that would come on. We had Vibe. We had the Magic Johnson show. We had Chevy Chase try to do a show. Remember when late night was so popular that you'd have other shows trying to come up? Arsenio thrived in that for a couple of years. 5 years in that. Against Carson and Letterman. And I try to think, man, they used to try to do that all the time. Like, let's get another late night show up there. John Sally doing a show on BT. I remember, I was like, man, and they all did that. Now, a lost cause. I mean, sorry. At Greg Gutfeld, I don't consider late night. 10 o'clock at night, it's just a comedy show. And also one of the easiest comedy shows that we made because the same jokes, just insert, set up for the same punchline. That's what that show is. Fine. It's easy laughs. But also, there's not much of a staff. They're just kind of doing it. And, Fox News in general, they're always kind of like being a little bit more lighthearted on their content. They're trying to be the opposite of all these other outlets out there. Okay? Just a different direction. But Fox does Fox stuff. So there are continuous cuts that are going on. And that's a big change. Now, leading up to this as well, not only do we have things going on where we had changes to the programming and shows being canceled, there's also staff layoffs. Paramount undertook several rounds of layoffs as the company's current 3 co-CEOs, CBS head George Cheeks, Chris McCarthy, president and CEO of Showtime MTV Entertainment Studios and Paramount Media Networks, and Paramount Pictures head Brian Robbins. By the way, that's the guy that worked with Dan Schneider on all those Nickelodeon shows. How the hell did that guy get from head of the class like 30 years ago to become the head of Paramount Pictures? Get the F out of here. They aim to slash $500 million in annualized costs. Yeah, so take a good big $40 million chunk out of the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Yeah, they're going to do that. Because remember, I said this last week as well. It wasn't just Colbert. It was the whole show. Financial decision. People want to make it political. It was a financial decision. Big corporate media merger, they're going to cut stuff. And if it were me, I could have told you after COVID, late night shows didn't need to come back. They don't provide anything. I could care less about the interviews that we see or they put up there with any of these celebrities that are out there. I mean, nobody really cares. If they did, the movie theaters would be going crazy for some of these things that are going on. Or, They used to go and have musical acts. And when do we hear about musical acts? None. Comedians? None. Used to be entertained on these shows. These shows are also done at a point where, like, the hosts have to go ahead and depend on their joke writers to go ahead and, like, lift the show up and make something out of it. But they're all run poorly, all of them. You know, something to be said about the fact that when you got a good host that can help go ahead and, you know, and really just stand up and make a show for an hour plus, whatever. Look, man, when I look at just in the last crop of people that we had, I mean, don't give me James Corden, right? But like Craig Ferguson, Jay Leno did a very good job with what he was able to do with that show after Carson. Conan O'Brien did a pretty good job. I felt like he did a pretty good job for himself. But the crop that we have now, I mean, I think Jimmy Kimmel probably at the beginning, but you get stuck in there and you don't have, you know, a way to kind of keep yourself grounded to who you are and what made you popular and entertaining in the first place. And you lose yourself in that Hollywood dynamic. Hard to kind of keep yourself grounded and keep you who you are and keep yourself true to who you were in the first place. Hollywood Reporter put out an interesting story about Paramount facing a talent rebellion. So, because of Stephen Colbert and The Late Show being let go, Jon Stewart, who helped to basically recruit Stephen Colbert, was a contributor to The Daily Show when Jon Stewart was doing it regularly, and he was, you know, in his prime doing that show, and it was very funny. Gone off the Colbert Report. And then Colbert, listen, who had a good career for himself, you know, beforehand, doing television and other things, before he got to The Late Show, Jon Stewart's pissed. I mean, Jon Stewart didn't get that show, but I'm sure that he wants to go and defend his guy. So that's why he did. So, a lot of political stuff going on with Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, and South Park this fall. Because they're all going after Trump. And that's the part that's kind of like the signal. That's not the signal, it's all noise. Oh, so Jon Stewart's blasting the company for caving to Trump's demand for a 60-minute settlement and canceling The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, saying, quote, maybe it's the path of least resistance for your $8 million merger to kill a show that you know rankled a fragile and vengeful president who's so insecure that he's suffering terribly from a case of chronic penis insufficiency. All that going on, Stewart says that, Colbert jumps on, and South Park depicts it. Like, okay, this is this whole, like, rebellion against Paramount and the merger. Forget about the politics of it. They're pissed because all their programming, except for South Park, is compromised. I mean, good thing for South Park is, you know, they got 5 years to cash in and, you know, let's see what they're going to do with their programming. South Park can do whatever they want. The check's in the mail. The check's already cashed. They don't have to worry about that. But with deals like Jon Stewart only doing like once a week, and Stephen Colbert leaving at the end of 2026, or May of 2026, I don't know if they're going to let Colbert stay around to continue to go on, not necessarily going after the president. It don't matter about that. It's going after the company. The company is now merging, and the bosses that might be going on there, they're probably not going to take lightly the fact that they got this talk show host that's being paid a lot of money that's going to continue to go and bash back at them. Hey, Conan O'Brien only had like about a week or so to go back after NBC after he got let go. So, and I'm surprised they let him stay around. Like in radio, when somebody gets fired, on the air, you got to just sit them aside and like let them sit out their deal and get out. So let Stephen Colbert have that much time to go ahead and just rail against Paramount Global for their deal here with Skydance, and then also just use it after the president. The president part is whatever, okay? You know what? You want to go attack him? Whatever. It doesn't matter to me. This is any political show. I'm bringing it up because it's all being talked about everywhere on these industry rags. They can't help themselves. So in the story from Hollywood Reporter, they talk about the fact that all these shows are part of Paramount Global facing an open rebellion over the handling of the 60 Minutes lawsuit, which resulted in a settlement. coupled with the canceling of Stephen Colbert's Late Show. So they're saying that the merger has been an incredibly messy process, resulting in plenty of hard feelings, which could have further consequences. Colbert and Stewart certainly will continue to open fire right up the ladder for the foreseeable future. And in the media business, the only thing that matters more than money is your reputation. Over the past few months, Paramount's reputation has gotten a lot smaller than average. But here's the thing. I mean, maybe part of the fact is that, people might be watching these shows because of the outrage. If the outrage is bringing in ratings, then, okay, let these guys vent for a while, as it will benefit us. Probably a considerable, competent, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the corporate line of thinking right now at Paramount-Skydance. That's what they're going to do and decide to go that route. I could see that. An interesting story that came in from the Wrap that talks about this is the Creatorverse. As late night is dying, podcasting is thriving. The future of talk shows is no longer a tradition. Kayla Cobb writes a story for the Wrap, and she's absolutely right. We don't need late night programming because the late night format has gone to podcasting. No doubt about it. So they go into the story and they say that here that if you want to make it a podcast, you need two things, curiosity and passion. Now, Creatorverse is an ongoing column in the Wrap, and Kayla Cobb writes it. So she says now that he spoke with Eric Nuzum, co-founder of the podcasting company Magnificent Noise. And Eric spoke about what Colbert's next steps could be after his late night show comes to an end. And then Eric makes the point that, podcasters today seem to share a lot of DNA with the late night hosts of yesterday. But there's that area of podcasting with all the big celebrities on. So after Conan loses his TBS show, after everything happened at NBC, gets dropped out of the Tonight Show, moves to TBS after that for a while, and then he signed a deal with SiriusXM, $150 million, to do Conan O'Brien is Conan Needs a Friend. And some of the biggest names are getting the biggest paydays in the talk show space. They're all podcasters. We talked about all these different deals that happened with Joe Rogan signing for $250 million for a new deal with Spotify. Alex Cooper and the Call Me Daddy network signing with SiriusXM for $125 million. Kelsey Brothers with Amazon's Wondery for $100 million. And podcasting continues to get bigger. Edison Research say that time spent listening to podcasts has jumped 355% since 2015. Podcast consumption now averages 773 million hours per week. I wouldn't be surprised to get to 1 billion hours in the next couple of years. Celebrities like Mark Maron, Theo Vaughn, Dax Shepard have become household names thanks to their podcast. And a buzzy name that might get a podcast will ensure the first 2 episodes will get big numbers, but after that, host isn't invested, listening base will tend to plummet, and podcasting prioritizes authenticity and is far more intimate than others. People don't just sit down to listen to a podcast. They often listen to them to make the dull minutiae of life more. Not wrong about that. Eric Nuzum also says about when it comes to the podcasting boom, the podcasting industry doesn't really know what it wants to do or what it wants to be. It's kind of flailing around, trying and seeing everything, what works and what doesn't work, which is fine. There's no universal answer for anyone. But see, the thing is, it doesn't matter. Because we have particular programs that do not have to follow a certain suit. I mean, there are shows that will follow a certain format. Talk show format, sure. But the thing is that we have now, more than ever, the late night format. Like, we see now, even with Hollywood, when it comes to the press junkets, when they're trying to promote a movie, you don't hear much about various TV shows getting the celebrities to go and talk to them. We're actually hearing more about them being on podcasts or other digital programming that's online. Okay, yeah, so like, all right, Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, they've been promoting Fantastic Four this week. A lot of stuff being said about them, press junkets, whatever they're doing. But they've been doing online stuff. And have they necessarily gone onto the couches of the late night talk shows? I don't know. And I don't care if they do. You don't see that much promotion about them anyway. But they try to say in the story that late night might be dying. Okay, let me just rephrase that, Kayla. It is dying. A slow death right now. Much like linear TV and cable networks are, period. But people still want their parasocial relationships and celebrity interviews. And that's not true, necessarily. If we want to catch them, we could just catch clips on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, whatever. It doesn't really matter. I mean, the thing is that if you're going to do programming in general, and it's the same thing goes for podcasts. The whole point is that you need to make your entire piece of content, the long form has to be interesting, compelling, entertaining, funny, whatever. You do not fill time just to fill time. And by the way, for some of those talk shows that they have out there, if you're going to do a show, you don't need to just run it like it's just raw and think, okay, we'll just run the whole thing and just people want to catch it, they just catch it. No, trim it down a little bit. Sometimes there might be things you do in the recording, not that good, so cut it out. Trim it up. Only deliver the best of the programming. Trust me, I do it all the time for my own programming. And when I also do it real time, like I do right now, the thing is, I want to make sure I'm putting out content that is like, I'm not wasting people's time. You've come here to listen to me for an hour, and I thank you for that. I'm also not going to waste your time. I'm also going to make sure that I am not insulting your intelligence. There's a lot to cover, and I'm going to cover it. And when I get done, I'm done, and that's it. But I'm also trying to get it within a certain amount of time. One thing I want to go and preface before we move along is that I have gotten the luck of scheduling an interview with Michael Harrison, the CEO of Talkers Magazine, also former CEO of Radio Records, and a longtime radio programmer, radio professional. Decades and decades of experience, going back to the freeform radio days of WNEW, and just all these different stations were out there with such great creativity. I get a chance to talk with him next week, and depending on what happens, my plan is if the Broadcasters podcast, if content's a little bit light next week, I will put the interview on my normal schedule of Friday mornings. And if I don't, no matter what, I will just go ahead and run the interview standalone as an extra episode, which I've been doing lately. I've had a couple interviews a couple extra interviews that I got to do with radio people, and I got lucky on this one as well, thanks to Ryan McCormick for setting this up for me. So I'll get to talk to him. I got a lot of questions to ask. Very fascinating, because in his area now, he's been, for the last 35 years, specifically focused on the area of talk radio. And I'd love to get what his take is on how podcasting has made a much difference for him in the space. So I'd like to go and see what he says. But that's coming up. I should have everything all recorded, and I'll get it published next week. Sometime next week, just send out to the Broadcasters podcast channel, kingofpodcasts.com. And also you go through, you can find, the show itself and wherever you find podcasts. So please make sure you're going to do that. If you haven't subscribed, please do. That would be really great. Now, another story that came out with the Skydance Media Paramount merger is the co-CEO of Paramount Global, Chris McCarthy, will be leaving. He's been head of Showtime and MT Entertainment Studios and co-CEO of Paramount Global. And George Cheeks will remain the head of CBS after the merger. And again, Brian Robbins is also expected to depart the company, and he's been head of Paramount Pictures. So changes at the top are also going to be changing. We know about that as well. One of the things that McCarthy was very instrumental in doing was forging a significant creative partnership with Taylor Sheridan, signing him to his first overall TV deal, and thus the Yellowstone universe, which includes Yellowstone, 1883, 1923, and the upcoming titles of Duttons, Y. Marshall's, 1944, and The Madison. He's also responsible for bringing Jon Stewart back to cable TV and The Daily Show, and also finished the deal with the South Park creators, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, to expand their partnership with Paramount to do 5 more seasons of South Park, 10 episodes each, and contribute multiple exclusive events to Paramount Plus. So that deal got signed and done before the merger. If South Park wanted to stay around, it had to be done before the merger happened, and he struck the deal. McCarthy was head of Showtime and MTV Entertainment Studios, oversaw brands like Paramount Network, Showtime, MTV, Comedy Central, and Smithsonian Network. Consolidating 9 separate businesses into one portfolio, nearly doubled its audience, and spearheaded the expansion of the business within the launch of Showtime / MTV Entertainment Studios, which now produces more than 100 series annually, and drove an aggressive push of the brands into social media. So Showtime/MTV Entertainment Studios has produced shows like Yellowstone, Emily in Paris, South Park, RuPaul's Drag Race, Billions, Dexter's Origins, Daily Show. Paramount Plus, they've done Tulsa King, George and Tammy, Mayor of Kingstown, Yellow Jackets, The Chai, and Special Ops Lioness. And by the way, I should recommend Mobland. It's a great show. Already up to episode 8, and there's a few more things left to go. But, I don't necessarily want to do one of the things where I'm binging through 10 episodes at one shot. I want to have something to watch, so I got to spread it out a little bit. Actually, it was quite the program with this guy. Started as a TV producer. Worked with Jeff Probst to develop and sell several unscripted properties to Paramount, then Viacom. Joined the company in 2003 as a freelance employee, rose to the ranks. First content leadership role in 2008 as general manager of MTV2, became president of VH1 in 2015, then added MTV to his purview in 2016. A lot there going to it. Now, Hollywood, essentially, when it comes down to it, they were hoping that David Ellison, as the controlling stake of Skydance, would take up on Paramount. There was a private equity buyer, Apollo, that did make an offer to Paramount and wanted to acquire the story lot for real estate. But then an approach by Warner Bros. Discovery and preliminary offer by Sony had the town wary of another major studio merger. And other interested parties were also trying to go and come in. You had Stephen Paul try to put a group together to go ahead and buy Paramount. You had Edgar Bronfman Jr., Barry Diller, and Byron Allen all together to go ahead and put together a consortium called Project Rise, try to buy. But Ellison would actually get the deal nevertheless. But as I said, as this merger happens, they were still getting some deals that came in after the fact. Initially, what Paramount-Skydance is already doing is not only did he just spend $1.5 billion right now for the South Park guys, they also have just announced $1.5 billion of capital investment in Paramount across operations, including broadcast. So, but the thing is, like I said, this deal that came out before, a 5-year global licensing deal with South Park, Trey Parker, Matt Stone were also disgruntled with Paramount because the duo publicly blamed the Skydance merger for effing up their show and Skydance executives for interfering in contract talks. Under the agreement, Skydance got to vet any material transactions while the deal is pending. But the thing was that the South Park guys were trying to get this deal done before Skydance meddled into this. They lucked out. They got it done. All right, we're going to go ahead and segue into some other news now. YouTube is making the case to podcasters that discovery lives in video. And I forget who I was talking to about all this, but yeah, when it comes to podcasting, I mean, even if the fact that YouTube is such a great haven for podcasters, that video's still important. We know that even for this program, my program is up there in a video format, not really a video format, but I've changed what's showing on the YouTube by having captions up. Something animated just so at least looks good and clean for those that want to listen to the show. Because for me to just be up here as a talking head and get all dressed up for it and, get well lighted on that stuff doesn't make a difference. Because, if I'm not showing you any kind of visuals or any kind of overlays or anything else, it doesn't make sense for me to go ahead and put this in a video format. Talking heads is fine, for everybody else, but I just don't think I need it. I'm a radio person at the end of the day. But I want to make sure that I at least have something that's kind of video friendly. Steve McClendon, who leads the platform at YouTube's podcasting team, says creators who don't embrace video are missing out on a major opportunity. Saying that audio is amazing when you're connected to it and it's in your earbuds, but how do you discover that? Video is actually the most effective way. Not doing video just feels like you're missing out on a huge swath of the audience. So it's the encouragement of creators and podcasters to do more video content and to pay more attention to the visual part. Now, YouTube specifically has visual and algorithmic strengths to help solve that. Now, YouTube has an ability to let users sample a show through recommendations, thumbnails, and search, and all tools that don't exist in traditional RSS-based podcasting. Right. Well, since the actual content that I have is not necessarily visually appealing, the thumbnails that I put together for the shows should be. That's, I think, what gets a little bit of attention, if anything at all, does. And how it works. YouTube has been seeing rapid growth in podcast viewership, including on TV. That users are watching more than 400 million hours of podcast content on living room devices last year alone. You know what? I do. Because if I do watch anything on TV, there's a couple of shows I watch from YouTube that I will put up on my TV screen in the living room. For whatever reason on YouTube right now, one of the things I'm really like watching a lot of, and I keep saving them on my watch later list, are body cam videos. All the cop stuff. I was always a fan of cops, and it's just like the same thing. I'm just missing the Bad Boys theme, and that's pretty much. But they're entertaining, man. And the people that are doing those body cam videos and are putting up online on YouTube, hey, thank you. Hours and hours of entertainment. Amazing. YouTube is updating its interface to improve the podcast experience on TV. And they want to make the podcast look and feel more like traditional shows or services like Netflix to improve navigation, episode progression, and binge listening. This is all good stuff, by the way. I'm glad that YouTube is actually want to do more to encourage more video content. Doesn't mean my content needs to be that, but there's a lot of content that could very much warrant from that. And I like the idea they want to do that. YouTube is revamping their podcast destination page, exploring more ways to highlight emerging creators. Quote, we really want to just celebrate the creators. They've invested a tremendous amount of time and energy building audiences on YouTube. And the creators still have to make strong content to break through, but argue that YouTube offers unmatched scale. If your podcasts are not on YouTube, in some ways you're really missing out on this fire hose of audience. And even I can say right now on YouTube, I'm actually trying to use it more because I'm getting close to monetizing this channel. The subscriber counts, doing a little bit, closing in on 550 subscribers. So I already have enough subscribers to qualify for monetization. But now I need watch hours. And one of the things either watch hours or I need to go ahead and produce YouTube shorts that will get a certain amount of audience within 90 days. So what I have done to try to help increase the audience is that I had not been using YouTube shorts to put out short form. I have audiograms that I put up on a regular basis. And since TikTok gave me a warning for some of my the Praise the Dodgers content from my other companion program, I said, well, I need to do something. And also Facebook and Instagram are still banning me. I figured, let me go ahead and leverage YouTube more than I need to. And it has worked really well. Immediately, I'm getting results from the YouTube shorts. And it's not hard for me to go ahead and add those into the mix like I have everything else. So I'm fine with the fact that I'm using YouTube now more than I have and taking advantage of shorts. So if you're doing podcasting, I would absolutely tell you to invest in shorts. It must be working. I don't watch YouTube shorts myself. I'm a TikTok, viewer at heart, but I never get myself too much entrenched into watching YouTube shorts. But obviously creating them is beneficial. Not every one of them is going to make a hit, but like I'm getting more traction, more viewership on my videos on YouTube. Quite surprising, but I'm glad because I guess the algorithm and the YouTube setup just works better for that. And hopefully by the end of the year, I'm monetized. But if you don't mind, if you're listening to this show and you want to help me out, you could donate. I got a kingofpodcast.com donate button right there if you want to go and do that. Feel free to do that. If that doesn't work for you, then let me just ask you for this. If you're on my YouTube channel and you're watching videos, let them play. Let them play and just give a little more time to listen to them, a little more retention, because that will help in the watch hours for this program, and I would greatly appreciate it. So if you would be so considerate, that's one of the biggest ways you can help out the show, is to help me build out another monetization route, a little more revenue stream to help put some more in the coffers for the program and for myself, because it is struggling to go into. I love doing the content, but I wish I could make something more off of it. I'll be honest. I don't want to go ahead and, go away and start doing sponsorships and doing other things that are just out of my purview that I don't want to do. I want to do it like I like to do it. Make sure the content's out there that people will enjoy. YouTube recently introduced the U.S. top 100 chart ranks podcasts in May based on watch time. It updates every Wednesday. And I haven't looked at this list in a while, but let's go take a look at what they have on the list right now in terms of who the podcast charts are right now. Currently on their charts, the weekly top podcast shows: Caller Daddy #1, Joe Rogan Experience 2, Midas Touch Podcast 3, Diary CEO 4, Kill Tony 5, Rotten Mango 6, Sean Ryan 7, 48 Hours 8, Bosch Reads Reddit Stories 9, Brian Tyler Cohen. Among those, I don't really care about those kind of programs because I like my grassroots kind of stuff personally. Aside from NPR losing over the next 2 years $1.1 billion to the Corporation of Public Broadcasting that would normally fund NPR, NPR has decided to cut their operating budget by $8 million to divert money towards member stations. So because of the rescission of federal funding for public broadcasting, NPR is going to cut their budget by $8 million to send the money to help support needy NPR member stations. Because of the cutting of funding of the federal funds for NPR, public radio stations nationwide will lose a total of $350 million the next 2 years. More than 70% of federal funding goes directly to local public and TV radio stations. A recent report says that 79 public radio and 33 PBS TV stations across 34 states and territories are in imminent danger of going dark. A lot of changes, all that. Interesting story that came out from Variety that Sinners and Superman being hits this year in 2025, but superhero movies and horror movies all together. There've been quite a few horror movies that were put out this year. With Sinners and Superman, the Superman, not that many of the superhero brand, but they're no longer box office guaranteed. And what's been said right now, among one of the distributors of movies out there, an exhibitor, actually talking about the fact there's a demand for higher quality. They're saying in the story that Hollywood's two most reliable genres, superheroes and horror, are showing signs of fatigue. And there are reasons for both of these types of genres to be suffering, because both types of fare are reaching an oversaturation point. But so far, Sinners has earned $365 million. It earned a lot of money for themselves. Now on streaming, Superman has so far $426 million to date. Hopefully going to make it to $1 billion for the worldwide box office. Final Destination Bloodlines, $285 million, have been very good in the box office for those movies, but not guaranteed. Audience research firm Screen Engine ASI founder CEO Kevin Getz says Hollywood takes the less risk-averse approach and makes what has worked until they've exhausted it. So there's a new horror movie film every week. Superhero movies got into a complacency. Exactly right. So there have been a lot of bombs in horror movies in the last couple of years. Blumhouse having 4 in a row. Megan 2.0 only making $37 million. Wolfman making $34 million. One in the Yard, $23 million. And Drop, $28 million. They all bombed. You have the return of the I Know What You Did Last Summer, the revival of that franchise, $24 million so far. The sci-fi thriller Companion, $36 million. Death of the Unicorn, $16.4 million. Tanking. All of them. Jason Blum, the founder of the Blumhouse Productions, says about the mixed bag of horror, there's a cap on the number of scary movies that could coexist on multiplex marquee. Saying that there's too much horror in the marketplace. We're used to a market that can absorb 12 to 15 horror movies where you can get these singles and doubles. I think on, he said. So there are still some horror movies left to go and push out this year to see what happens if they're going to make some money. You have Zach Cregger's Weapons, the Jordan Peele-produced film Him, Blumhouse's Black Phone 2, and Five Nights at Freddy's 2, hoping to spark some money coming in that'll help make things really change out. The superhero exhaustion, same thing goes. Marvel hasn't been hitting that big in their movies right now. Captain America Brave New World, on a $180 million budget, broke $450 million. Thunderbolts, on a $180 million budget, $382 million. Marvel's making money, but not the kind of money they were making. And when it comes to Superman, it's because it's different than other DC films. Word is like outside of the mold of the other action movies, Superman being vulnerable, losing fights, which we haven't seen. Kevin Feige told reporters that with the case of Marvel, the mandate is to do less at a higher caliber. Because you had to go and work on things for Disney Plus and for ABC and all that. Between 2007 and 2019, they produced 50 hours of stories. But since the Avengers Endgame, after that, they've done well over 100 hours of stories in half the time. For Marvel's Cinematic Universe, they got Fantastic Four First Steps right now coming up this weekend. And then next year, Avengers Doomsday and Spider-Man Brand New Day. And then Avengers Secret War in 2027. They're expecting big money for those. Finally, a radio story I want to bring up here. Programming in the time of streaming. A radio records declaration from Sean Ross, so I like to go and read his column on a regular basis. And he's saying here that there are people on the radio music side of the industry trying to put a positive spin on the state of music and the charts over the last 5 years. The audience is choosing now. The point is TikTok that has ultimately changed everything. Listen, with TikTok now, and they're embedding a Spotify. Like when I see a song that pops up, and I want to hit the plus sign on Spotify on the bottom of the FYP page because there's a song they're playing. And it could be old, it could be new. But if when I see that plus sign right there, and it's a song I want to hear, it instantly goes to my like songs folder in Spotify, and then I can move it to a playlist. Fantastic. I'm going to ask for more. It's really, really cool to do that. And yes, the audience through streaming, the taste has changed. And what's really interesting when Sean Ross brings this point is I look at, there's a guy that puts up a feed on YouTube called Billboard Top Songs. Please follow him. Really good. There's several different lists of music that he puts up. He basically counts down the charts. So everything from the Billboard charts when it comes to the Hot 100 and the bubbling under Hot 100. Like he'll play 125 songs from 125 to 1 of that week. That comes up like immediately, almost like after the chart has just been published. And then like the next day I can actually catch that and see it count down. Same thing with Billboard Breakdown show, which I watch with Mark Grondin on his Spectrum Pulse channel. Great stuff. And then I'll follow the official chart. If I don't catch it on BBC Radio, because unfortunately BBC Sounds went away in the UK, in the US and UK, so now I have to go and catch it live. I got to put on the TuneIn app. I have to go look for it on Friday morning and catch what I catch of it. But that's okay. If I miss it, I can watch the chart, the official chart, on this Billboard Top Songs channel, which is great. Then, on Fridays, like Friday nights, he'll drop the Spotify Global 200. The Spotify Global 200, you get a real taste of the music around the world that people are listening to on Spotify. The hits are definitely prominently there. But then you look at the songs that people are going back to that are, doesn't matter how old they are. But I see songs that are on there regularly that are gold records from various formats. Killer's Mr. Brightside. Radiohead's Creep in the top 40 of this Spotify Global 200 list. When I look at Fleetwood Mac and Dreams, or any song from Coldplay that's up there now, and then the variety of music and the genres you listen to. Whether it's K-pop, whether it's Brazilian funk, or whether it's Afrobeats, or whether it's reggaeton, whatever there is. It's amazing. And then you also see the songs that stay around the charts for a long time because the charts are stagnant. And people are willing to go and listen to songs for longer because they don't mind. So even when they talk about here that the people want beautiful things for 19 months, or he says here, 63-year-old Leslie Gord LP cuts for a few weeks, who are we to curate? Well, if we're going to go for an older, mention, let's go for Connie Francis, Pretty Little Baby. And unfortunately Connie Francis passed away, but at least she got a chance to go and celebrate the fact the song got restored and people really got into her again. Really cool. Amazing. Sean Ross continues to go on and say that maybe there's a problem. Current formats struggle except for country. Another format has a robust product flow. Alan Burns, a consultant with radio, that says that the top 10 was full of songs that were not consensus powers. In fact, sometimes not being powered by any CHR in the top 50 markets. And another column from researcher Matt Bailey says, where the hell are the hits? There's no ordinary consensus hit at the moment. Well, that's the music label's fault. Record labels do not want to push any major artists, and they're not, forcing the artists to go and get out there and churn out music and churn out hits. They're not doing it as much. Like they don't have to do that at all. Matt Bailey, who writes for GraphsAboutSongs.com, mentions in his story about this. Since the 1990s, around 58 songs have reached the Billboard Hot 100's top 10 in a typical year. Streaming has boosted that number to 63 songs in a typical year now. And this story I actually prefaced previously. But the fact that it's, again, the people deputized to be both AR managers and music directors taking the summer off when we need them most. Streaming has created a profit model for labels. And that's the thing you got to remember, too, is that streaming, like at Spotify, they have minority stakes divvied out to all the major record labels and publishers. They're going to do that. One of the things they said here in this story was that letting streaming making all the decisions has not been a viable path for radio. So there's a country station, KYGO in Denver. They really follow the streaming charts for what should be out there. They've been a consistent winner in a market with informal competition, but they are pointing to stations that are heavily influenced by streaming in both the CHR and country that have been less successful. They do not consistently beat their informal competition. Now, streaming stations that will really follow the streaming charts to program their stations, there's KMVQ 99.7 now in San Francisco, or WDJQ Q92 in Canton, Ohio. They're using streaming to inform their judgment, not in place of it. One station that has been doing a lot of work successfully and being well researched is WIXX in Green Bay, Wisconsin. They're powering Benson Boone, Miles Smith's Nice to Meet You. Oh, and Benson Boone's song that they're putting in Power, which is in heavy rotation. Sorry, I'm here for someone else. They're also using Shinedown's 365. They might be powering songs outside of Spotify's top 200, but would they do even better if they're putting in heavy rotation no one noticed by the Marias instead? Alan Burns cited there are 4 songs that have become top 10 hits without being major market, heavy rotated songs. 2 of them without big streaming numbers was Benson Boone's Sorry, Ed Sheeran's Azizam, and then they talk about Somber's Undressed and Sabrina Carpenter's Manchild being instances of radio lagging behind streaming. Radio didn't want to make a heavy rotation out of Die With a Smile across the board until it had already been number 1 streaming. He also makes the point that we are missing streaming hits. There are so many hits right now we should not be overlooking. There's Dark Thoughts from Lil Tecca, Mutt by Leon Thomas, Shake It to the Max, Fly by, and other streaming hits that radio has futzed, but not only fully embraced. And then he also brings the point up that we still need radio hits. That utilizing streaming data would get radio more usable records, but not enough. It doesn't establish radio as anything more than a Me Too version of streaming without the excitement of ongoing renewal. We haven't reached a point where radio can cheerfully abdicate finding the hits. They're not allowed to, Sean, because the corporate program directors and music directors, regional music directors, they're not allowed to go and do that. They're not allowed to go and do that. And some of these stations you're talking about, they're also independently owned or smaller clusters or smaller companies that are allowing some of this flexibility, this enterprising, as we call it in the radio business, to be allowed. Also, some of the fact that here with Sean Ross, that Radio Flex, not sure what it is, but it needs to happen when somebody is listening. So Mariah Carey put out a new song, Type Dangerous, that did get around. Radio embraced it quickly, but growth has slowed and now disappeared. So radio stations that put it up there and put it up in rotation, they're dropping it. Media Base shows only 3 reporters playing Type Dangerous even once a day at middays. And if they put the song on, it'll be put on at 10 a.m. when adults are available, not 10 p.m. when the kids are still. A lot more into that story, but Sean Ross, always a great job of going to do that. RadioInsight.com, INSIGHT. I got to go find him and, get him interviewed, because that would be a pretty cool thing to do with him. But like I said, I really enjoy his stuff. And there we go. That's the program for tonight. Again, I will be doing an interview with Michael Harris of Talkers Magazine, and I hope to get a lot of questions asked about him. I mean, he's another guy that in the space of media, like the legacy he leaves, behind him with radio records, with radio in general, is so expansive and so important and integral today. I'm curious to hear about that and the space he's in right now, talk radio, and what he's thinking about right now of the disruption of programming that is also affecting his program, the programming that he reports on regularly for 35 years. So come back to another Broadcasting Podcast. Remember, the content is king, and the control of your content is yours.